Hello, as you heard, my name's David. I'm a computer scientist. I work at CSIRO. I work with speech and occupational therapists, and I build technology for interventions, and we go out and test those interventions, and we also study the ethics and legality of that. This talk is on a technology called chatbots and how it might be applied for children on the autism spectrum. Two complicated topics that I could speak all day about, but I only have about 15 minutes, so I'll do my best. This is William. William's age 2.5 here. He is soon will be diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder. At 2.5, he had no words. He had high anxiety and repetitive behaviour. He had high anxiety from meeting new people. Out of frustration, out of the inability to communicate, he would self-harm. And he didn't play with toys or socialise with other children. So we'll fast forward a few years. His two favourite things, so he's had 18 months, he's now just turned 5. He's had about 18 months of full-time intervention. His two favourite things are riding horses, as you can see on the left, and technology. And this is, he's aged about 4 here, and he's started to be vocal. We'll see if he plays.
What's that one, William? Good boy. Good boy.
That's me in the photo because this is actually my son. So he loves technology, and he actually learned to speak via Siri. He spoke from about age of 3, and he wasn't interested. Well, Siri, the technology, as we know with many other children on the autism spectrum, they gravitate towards technology. We think it's because they have the locus of control. They can control what happens, so the anxiety drops down. They also have that visual appeal, and for him with Siri is if we make a sound, the vibration, the screens on the lines on the screen sort of shake, and then he would come and get me and try and make it do things, and then he started talking. So that sort of started a lot of my work in a technology called chatbots. So before I get into that, just for people that aren't familiar with this condition, it's at least 1 in 100. I really don't believe it. I think it's more like 1 in 50, which would be in line with the US, are diagnosed on the autism spectrum. Basically, it can be characterized with difficulties in communication, social interaction, sensory processing. It is actually a much more complex condition than that. The autism spectrum is very wide. You can have people with profound disabilities for the rest of their life. You can have people diagnosed severely autistic, and then through therapy, they come down and they become quite independent and fully functioning. I have personally seen that a few times, actually. So, how do you get a child that doesn't speak? How do you get them communicating? The typical thing is using picture communications. We know evidence-based that people on the spectrum think visually, so quite often we get the first challenge is to get functional communication. So it's called picture exchange communication. They have a book with pictures. If they want something, they get the picture and they show it to the parent or the clinician, and then they get rewarded for that. So they might be to use a toilet or favorite toy. That then goes on to typically, if they still haven't developed speech, they might use they get more expertise. They'll use technology. This is on the right there is an app called I can never pronounce it, Prolo to go. Basically, it constructs simple sentences and it speaks for them. So many children use this and are able to speak. It's quite often like a fallback. If they want a more complex sort of statement, they might sort of speak and use a series of symbols. So my questions, a lot of my work for the last 3 years is what happens if it speaks back. So from a research and a clinician perspective, that might be interesting to collect data, to collect on progress, how they're going at home. What happens, even though you get full-time intervention, what happens at home is equally important as what happens at the school or the clinic. So another thing we think, if it speaks back, that might give them an opportunity to practice really simple social scenarios. So when I drive my son to his special school, he sits in the car and along the way he'll say, "Hello Billy, hello Stephen." He's practicing for when he actually has to really do it. So as you go later in life, could it help with making new friends and with school life? I don't have time to talk about it, but bullying is a very dominant theme now in school life for someone on the autism spectrum. We know that someone with autism is 4 times more likely to be bullied than a typical person. We know from the literature that if you're an extroverted person on the spectrum who wants to make friends, you're even more likely to be bullied. We know there is significant mental health issues. Children on the spectrum are 30 times more likely to have suicidal ideation, which is 4 times more than a child with clinical depression. So these are the sort of things that maybe we could sort of attack with this technology. So you've seen the new thing now is interacting with computers via natural language. We have Apple Siri, Amazon Alexa. This is sort of voice activation. They're not really designed for health applications, but they are becoming very, very sort of common. So these are, in computer science, we call them conversation agents, but they're commercially said as virtual assistants. So what a chatbot is like these devices, but it has more comprehensive language abilities. So it's really just a computer program that simulates conversation through artificial intelligence. So this is our first chatbot, which is you can speak to.
Thanks for that. Have you been up to anything interesting today?
We watched a good movie called The Zookeeper.
Can you tell me more?
It's about a zookeeper who works at a zoo and the animals help him.
Human life just sounds so fascinating to me. Where have you travelled to before?
On the holidays, we went to New Zealand.
What was New Zealand like?
So even though that was a really mundane conversation, just remember sometimes getting people on the autism just to speak can be a challenge, and they need lots and lots of practice. And the other thing I should mention is that sometimes, particularly on the early years, one word can make a huge difference. One word for like toilet or hungry could mean the difference between a happy child and a child banging their head on cement.
Thanks for that.
So going back, what happens if the child is nonverbal? So it's about 25% are nonverbal, as in they can't produce speech, but they can still communicate. Our interest has been, can we put AI into an app that is sort of picture based? So we modeled it based on research, and so we built it as sort of a prototype app. It's based on that app that you saw before. It was called Prolo to Go. It's that one's about $400. So basically, the user can put their symbols. They press their symbols in there. So we have done papers on how we designed this. So the specific words are color coded. There's about 30,000 symbols in this one. So they put their symbols in, and then the bot can actually respond, not only in voice, but in the symbols as well. So we also use a common standard for the board organization. A lot of these individuals sort of have their own custom sort of board, and a lot of the apps available have like an open standard so they can shift these layouts to different apps. So you can also put in your own symbols, like for if you've got your pet dog, etc. So you can add your own symbols, and this is good info for the bot. If it can, so it's always looking for topics to talk about. So we want to get these children speaking about different scenarios. So if you say you put in a picture of your pet dog, and then that's information that it can feed into it, and it'll ask how's the dog going, for example. So what my work has been doing is, this is where it gets complicated, is I'm trying to make this technology accessible to clinicians and therapists. So I've been working on a portal where you can where people can contribute. It's based on Google Docs, where we have all these different people writing content. Like so, chatbots ours are built up on what's called brains, and brains are just it's a collection of scripts, logical statements, and some machine learning code. And that's the purpose of the brain, is to get an input and get a response. So we've built a portal. This is still a prototype, but where all different clinicians could log in, and we can simultaneously build up this material. So it might be a brain about, I think there's one there about bullying, small talk conversations, speech therapy, like speech pathology therapy, etc. So how we do it, and this is, so we're working with Autism CRC, and this will be rolled out early next year for adults on the autism spectrum to give them support services. We have these different brains, and basically they're different topics, and we sort of line them up and we put them in an order of priority. So if the statement is, why do my friends laugh at me, the first brain that sort of gets activated is is probably built by a therapist, not by me, because I'm a computer scientist. So its content has the different strategies from the literature. We've been putting them into this brain, and then it can sort of give some support. Would you like to speak to a parent, teacher, stuff like that? Would you like to? It can even be a pretend bully to practice. So the second, if it's a statement like today is my birthday, how old am I? If a lot of kids say really unpredictable things, and they'll test it. So it skips. It'll won't find a match in the first brain, and then it gets to the second brain where it's sort of its purpose is to get information to use in future conversations and probably to do logic reasoning. If they say, "Mum brought me a monster truck," which is actually is a real statement, it sort of goes to this last brain, which is where I basically work on. I work on the mathematical logic, reasoning, and just small talk stuff. It would then come. It just would sort of reach there and come back with, "That's great. Tell me about it." So that's me finished.
Excellent.
Is that 10 minutes or 15?
So does anyone have any questions? Yes.
So what's your back end for the pattern matching and stuff? It's a little bit like ELIZA, a very, very, very old program.
Yeah, I'm familiar with ELIZA.
Very, very old.
Yes.
And so I'm just wondering what actually you technically use at the back end to do with that.
It's a combination of, we'll use everything that works.
Okay.
So the common standard now is just a I'll try not to go into computer science, is based on AIML is the first thing, which is just sort of script based. The good thing about that is there's lots of contributions from open source, so you can, that small talk stuff. A lot of my research background, the other ways you can do it is through basically language semantics. You get the sentence in, you pull it apart, try and figure out the meaning, and then that's sort of also my work. So we also add in the more the classic AI, which is logic, reasoning, deductive, and I do a lot of inductive so just trying to sort of figure out what's going on, and the kids like to do little tests to it. The other one is machine learning, where we just give it a chunk of data, and we just feed it and hopefully that it works. The more the clinicians and therapists would be more script based, and which would be the AIML. So.
Yes.
Is there a way? Oh, thanks. Is there a way that you can input the reactions and of the user to improve the experience? You know, does the AI respond to the? Is there some kind of learning benchmark or something that can help improve the experience of the user, or is it not oriented that way?
Do you mean sort of like trying to get other data other than just text and voice?
Well, you know, is it making the user happy? Is it engaging them for longer? Is it taking them into new areas? That sort of thing.
So, yeah. So what we look at they're the questions we're trying to answer as it does it actually work. We know there's quite a lot of anecdotal evidence to suggest that these sort of devices do get them speaking. The data that we look at for engagement is the pauses for starters. So you do get this back and forth quite a lot, and I've done other talks where I've sort of shown this. It can be difficult. We do sentiment analysis as well, that sort of stuff. We look at this as they're speaking. We actually look at the because I do work in dementia and Parkinson's, and we look at speech pathology. So we look at the tone of the voice, whether it's getting louder and softer. That can get someone on the autism spectrum. It can get a bit dubious because they often will have sort of speech anomalies maybe, and they also can speak in quite a monotone voice, which is another thing we look at actually in Parkinson's disease. But that we look at those sort of things. So, but I mean, this is really, to me, it's a very long-term study, and we just keep getting better every year, and then we do get more engagement. So we've done many trials with general population, and basically the more work we put in, the longer the talks you have, and etc.
Any further questions? Okay, lovely. Thanks, David.